welcome to this UK Research and Innovation Staff Workshop. My name's Matt Good. My day job, or my permanent job, is Director of Communications and Public Engagement for Research Councils UK. But I'm actually here because I'm currently on secondment running communications for UK Research and Innovation as part of the Shadow Strategy Directorate, where I'm sort of running the transition comms, setting up UKRI, and also starting to plan for what does communications as part of UKRI look like from April and beyond.
Andrew Thompson, I'm Chief Executive of the Arts and Humanities Research Council. I also, many of you know, been leading on the Global Challenges and Newton Fund, Arts and UK, and now UKRI and the International Strategy from UKRI, and I chair the Research and Strategy Innovation Board for Arts and UK, so I have a pretty good sort of perspective both from within my own council, but across the Seven as well.
Thank you. So the aim of today, so I think first of all to reiterate Laura, our colleague from the Change Readiness Programme, who's responsible for the fantastic organisation of these workshops. As I've said, there is a camera there recording. That's primarily to record Andrew's section in a moment on how AHRC works and how AHRC is preparing for the transition to UKRI. It's absolutely not there to record your thoughts, or as already said, your secrets and whispers about what you think about the transition to UKRI. So please, when we have our discussion sections, it will be turned off. Yeah. So you can talk entirely freely. If you haven't already, could you please grab a sticky label and nameplate yourself and your councils. One of the objectives of these workshops is to help develop some organic networking across the councils that will make up UKRI, and certainly I've been involved in a number of the early workshops that ran last year, and one of the really nice and positive things that came out of those was how much people valued the opportunity to talk to people from different councils. So over the next hour and a half or so, we'll have a discussion from Andrew around how HRC is preparing for UK research and innovation, and then a discussion session that will facilitate around how you feel your councils are preparing for the move to UK research and innovation. Are there more things that the councils individually, collectively could be doing? Are there more things that the UKRI programme could be doing to support the preparation for UKRI? We'll have an update on how the operational readiness, how the move towards UKRI is going, what the latest announcements and progress and what the milestones that are coming up in the next few months are. And then we'll have another discussion on what are the big questions that you still feel are outstanding from your perspective. What are the big things that you think are still not being answered, or that you feel you would really value getting answers from? Where we can, we'll provide some input and feedback on that, or we'll make sure we take that away and feed it into the programme. So why are we doing these workshops? So first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to come and participate. Hopefully you felt you had a good idea of what you were coming along to participate in. But from our perspective, these are really around giving as many of the people who are moving to UKRI the opportunity to learn about what different councils are doing as we prepare for day one in April, and what different councils are starting to think about what UKRI will mean for them and their people beyond. We in Shadow UKRI and in the UKRI Transition Programme are very, very keen to hear your views on how the new organisation is beginning to develop, your thoughts on what that means to you, and also how things could be done differently. And again, like I mentioned before, to give as many people as possible the opportunity to network more widely outside their councils. I'm sure as many people are aware, and I know I recognise some familiar faces from workshops I was involved in before, the programme ran 21 initial workshops from June to October last year, and those workshops really generated some really valuable feedback around staff views around the transition to UKRI, and particularly fed a huge amount of information into the development of the values and behaviours, which I think are shared on the tables in front of you. Also generated a huge number of questions from staff in terms of how UKRI is developing, what people felt they still weren't aware of, that were fed into the FAQ sheets that have been prepared and are available to everybody on the information hub. So what we're really now moving towards, with 2.5 months to go to day one, is thinking more about how we can use the information from these workshops to really help support the development of the transition to the new organisation. So I'll hand over to Andrew with the UKRI rundown.
I'm afraid you have me both with a lurgy that's going round and on the fourth meeting today that I've been chairing. What I'm going to do is, I think rather than just sort of give you a presentation and take questions, just feel free to interject and make comments as we go through. It probably makes more sense that way. I'll use the PowerPoint a little bit, but not everything I'm going to say is going to map perfectly onto the sort of PowerPoint slides. And actually, I think the thing I want to say before I do anything about AHRC specifically is that my feeling at the moment is that what UKRI means for staff in AHRC, I used to have one of my staff members with me here, recently acquired, is that is actually quite variable according to where you're sitting in the organisation. And I did an all-staff briefing this morning, and I think you carve up the cake of AHRC in different ways, in terms of what people do. But if you're in shared services, and some of you will know because I think other people from ESRC and EPSRC here in the room, is that those three councils moved to a shared services unit of their own, a professional sort of services unit, a few years ago. And so there is quite a big question of sort of how will that, transition or morph or sort of reform itself moving into UKRI. So in shared or corporate services has a specific inflection, I think, for our councils insofar as people are involved and invested in the PSU. If you're a member of staff that is sort of actively involved in one of the two, I call them new hypothecated funds, the Global Challenges Research Fund and the Industry Strategy Challenge Fund, your experience of transitioning to UKRI is probably different than if you're a member of AHRC staff that is more involved on a day-to-day basis with running our regular grant schemes, that exist within AHRC and are not the GCRF and not the ISCF. If you're a member of staff in one of those areas where we're developing a shared capability, such as the one that I do lead in international, or another one that's in the making in comms, again, your experience might be different still. So I don't know whether that resonates with other councils, but when I ask the question of AHRC, what does the transition feel like to UKRI, I don't get a singular answer, I get answers in the plural. And I think that's probably quite understandable according to the nature of activity involved in. But that's, I think, struck me more in the last sort of, 2 or 3 months. There's not a singular experience within HRC. Obviously there are some sort of commonalities and there are some sort of shared questions, but there's quite a lot of difference, even in the smallest council by sort of number of staff. Maybe we can flick through to the first slide if that's all right. Some of the issues, I think, for AHRC are issues that would be there regardless of UKRI. They sort of predate UKRI. Some of them were magnified by the spending review in 2015. And the question is, will UKRI allow us to tackle those challenges differently than if we'd still been part of RCUK? So for us, one of the biggest issues that we face is that as of the last Research Excellence Framework, almost a third of research active staff in the UK, 31.5%, sit in the arts and humanities. So in one council, we're looking after almost a third of the research base on less than 4% of the science budget. And all councils have budgetary pressures that they're managing at the moment. But that particularly manifests itself for us as the biggest pressure on our budget is the pressure around training the next generation of researchers and the doctoral training. And because we are the main provider of PhD scholarships, so we don't really have any industry provision. In fact, the big cultural institutions like the British Museum or Tate or National Gallery come looking to us to fund collaborative doctoral awards. We run a full service model of doctoral training, let me put it like that, across all disciplines and across the UK on a competitive basis, so you're not guaranteed a doctoral training partnership. And we recently had to take a big decision at Council where the 500 studentships that we put into that competition previously, we're putting in 375 in the next round and requiring universities to match fund to make it viable. So that's a long-winded way of saying that some of the biggest issues we face as a council predated UKRI. They would be there regardless of UKRI, and the question for our staff and council is how will UKRI help us or address us, and particularly the new funding coming in from the autumn statement to tackle those issues. The other thing that may or may not, I'm guessing probably is common across the councils, is if I go out on university visits, which I do quite a lot of and engage with staff, all the way from people, our award holders to people on the peer review college, to people in university management and vice chancellors. I think the question that comes from our subject communities is, as we move into UKRI, will we maintain a distinctive voice for the arts and humanities? And I imagine that is probably true of all disciplinary areas, yeah? Or will we somehow get, submerged, within the new organisation? And to which, my response is that absolutely no reason, well, I don't envisage that the ways we interact and engage with our subject communities will be changed radically by UKRI. I would hope that that significant part of our community, maybe we can flick through to the next slide now. So that's gives you some idea there of our subject coverage. I suppose, sorry, I'll come back to what I was just saying, but the comment I will make there is that, and again, I think this is true of all councils, is when we talk about whatever phrase you want to use, but multidisciplinary research, I think all of the councils do a lot of multidisciplinary research within their councils, yeah, as well as across council structures. So when Paul Nurse was talking about one of the main rationale for sort of UKRI being given stronger structures to work across councils, most of us do a lot of multidisciplinary research because within our councils, because we cater for a lot of different sort of disciplines. But if we sort of flick through to the next slide here, no, the one after that, and then I'll sort of come back, is we have sort of big areas of sort of cross-council activity, like medical humanities, digital, environmental humanities, study of conflict, for instance, yeah? And so our range of collaborating goes through to MRC on global health, ESRC with refugee crises and forced displacement, EPSRC with the digital sort of humanities, NERC with the environmental humanities. So one of the questions that HRC staff are facing as they engage with universities and our subject communities is, how is UKRI going to make all that different or not? And what's quite interesting is, I think that just thinking about transition to UKRI, the sort of questions that we're asking within HRC as a group of staff are not always exactly the same questions that we get asked when we go out into universities and start engaging with our subject communities. I mean, they by and large are not very interested in the plumbing, if I can put it like that, yeah? But they are interested in whether our grant schemes that we run are going to look different to the way that we look at the moment as we move into UKRI. If I just go back one slide, is one of the exercises that we've gone through both internally within AHRC, within our strategic advisory groups and council, and reaching out into the academic community, is to try and get a more condensed and concise explanation of what the arts and humanities do and what the value of the arts and humanities is as we move into UKRI. So we've got, so that the messaging is strong and clear. We actually had, I don't know, NERC certainly have the, is anyone from NERC yeah. You have your equivalent of this. I don't know if you're aware of that, yeah? So something that you could literally put on a PowerPoint slide just about, and it's quite small text, isn't it? Yeah. Or a side of A4. And so we have a sort of opening paragraph here, which is, if you like, a little bit more fundamental or existential. What do our disciplines stand for? What do our researchers do? We have a second sort of paragraph that sort of says, well, tries to move into how is that relevant to economy and society. So if you like UKRI, knowledge, yeah, pursuit of knowledge, society and economy, and then what does that actually, if you sort of have to sort of put it in as pithy form as you can, what is it that we think, from whence does the value or significance or importance of our research arise? That took us several months to get to that point, but I think it did help us as a group of staff in AHRC and the way we talk to our subject communities to give us a greater sort of confidence that we could represent ourselves effectively moving in to a new organisation. I think maybe flick through that, maybe all of the... what are we doing? It's okay, if you move into more sort of nuts and bolts territory, what are we actually doing practically? Well, the impact statement I've just mentioned and the rationale for that. We found, and I think this will not be unique into HRC, but the move through the spending review and to UKRI, the new hypothecated funding, has put many more demands on our staff and pressures. So we have had to move in short order to not just think about headcount. There has been an issue of headcount, but it's much more than that. It's the skills and aptitudes, and abilities that we need to have and to grow and to develop in that different type, of funding program. So we found with the Global Challenges Research Fund that we were writing calls in quite different ways to we wrote them previously. That wasn't a bad thing at all, but it was more time consuming, it required more deliberation, there was more expectation in the staff that were doing that. So we've strengthened our senior management team, we've strengthened our strategic leads, we've created a strategic planning and evidence and impact team for the first time. That's rather disparate before. But really suffice to say that we've had, in short order, some quite, sort of large-scale sort of staffing changes, which has not just been about bringing more people into HRC, but then about organising ourselves or configuring ourselves differently internally. We've had the first staff away day to talk about UKRI, which will now be, we've got a series of away days planned. If anything, I probably would have moved earlier to do that than we did. The first one was very valuable, but maybe we waited too long to have it. And we've got other ways of different channels of communication that we're trying to open up, including key messages coming out more regularly from our senior management team and some of our other sort of key discussions, sort of forums, suggestion boxes, etc. So maybe I'll sort of pause there because it'd be interesting to get from those of you who aren't HRC your sense of what's similar to what you're doing and your councils and what's different, and just to get some sort of comments and reactions. I don't know, Paul, you're in HRC, so is there anything that I'm missing or that you...
I don't think so. I think I very much recognise it as somebody who's joined fairly recently. As it feels like an organisation sort of preparing itself and giving itself a bit of a MOT and a health check before it moves into this new organisation to get ready for what is going to be a big challenge as well as an opportunity, no doubt. And doing that right at the level of the staff, the senior management, our processes, how we work as an organisation. So, yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, so I think we can, Alex here from BDSS, I think we can recognise, many of the things you actually mentioned, looking at some of the new opportunities, GCRF, ISCF, that have required from everybody around the office different ways of working, different methods of engagement, but also being able to be responsive to those opportunities. while still being able to do the business as usual in normal responsive mode grant type activities or studentship, while as well preparing for and feeding briefing for senior management and so on, or participating to activities like this in the kind of UKRI transition context. And so I think the three together really exacerbate some of the pinch point where we might see and how things are moving forward.
I think one challenge is, I mean, we had this within AHRC. There's a sort of AHRC version of what in UKRI is. The new is really important, but it's equally important that you don't devalue the old. So whenever we launch a new strategic program in AHRC, most university research officers decide that's where we spend most of our money because it's a new program. And you have to go out and remind them that no, most of the budget is spent on doctoral training and our responsive mode, strategic support for the research base. Yeah? So there's always a balance, I think, to it. I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of airplay around the global challenges and industrial strategy, and they're very important, and the big opportunities. But it's important, I think, you know, to get some nuance into conversations and both remind our staff, but also our subject communities that, you know, of our 92 million, 35 to 40 million goes every year in strategic support for the research-based responsive mode, yeah? And sometimes I feel in HRC, I don't know if you have this in other councils, is that, borrow that phrase, you know, we don't give that the oxygen of publicity, and because we don't, you know, people have a rather skewed view of where we spend. So I think sort of keeping the new and the old in the same sentence and valuing both is really important.
Should we move to the discussion section, Laura? So, thank you, Andrew. What we'd now like to do on the three tables, I don't know if somebody from that table in the corner wants to shuffle that way to even up the numbers slightly. It's just to build on what we've just heard from Andrew there, and really have a chat on the table over the next 20 minutes. First question, what is your council or your shared service area doing to prepare for UKRI? So both in that sort of conceptual sense, which I think Alex outlined quite nicely there, but also really some of the nuts and bolts, because I'm aware that some of the councils have really done some quite detailed thinking on their own, but also collectively around what the changes moving into UKRI is really going to mean. And I know, particularly from former colleagues at BBSRC, some of the work that's been done there. And I think it might be useful to share some of that. But then also in terms of some of that cultural thinking that we've heard about. And then I think we're also very interested from the programme and the shadow UKRI side to hear around what do you think could be doing, you know, we've still got 2.5 months before day one, and clearly there's going to be more work being done as well. What more could be being done? What more do you think that your individual councils or your work areas could be doing, but also what could the UKRI programme team be doing to support this transition now? Is that okay? If we could have, if someone could, as ever with these sort of things, volunteer to scribe, but also there will be an ask to feedback from each table at the end.